Baltimore Ravens have plenty of players who have to step up during the 2024 season, and we take a look at some early X-factors for the team. All that and more coming up next on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher. I'm the host of Locked On Ravens, and of course, I write over at the Ravens Wire as well. We're your 5-day-a-week daily Ravens podcast. So we have you covered Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. We also do bonus episodes after every single Ravens game. We do some live streams. So we have everything for you over here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms, and includes in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We're back with our Taco Thursday guest, is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, and of course a Super Bowl champion, knows a thing or two about winning. It is Qadry Ismail. Q. We're in week 2 of OTAs. The Ravens got a nice little off day yesterday as John Harbaugh treated the team to some Top Golf. I've actually never been to Top Golf. I want to make my way there. I know. Look at, if you're watching, Q is in disbelief. I've always wanted to go. I will hit the ball in the driving range. I've been there. I've played a couple of rounds of golf, but Top Golf is still on my list. The Ravens, their players beat me to it.
I'm telling you this right now, bro. You are missing out. We are going to do a show at Top Golf.
Oh, yeah.
That is the bottom line. We are doing something, because for you not to do Top Golf is criminal.
It's been something, again, I've wanted to do it for a long time. I like just going to whether it's the range or whatever, but and look, we saw the Ravens put out a couple clips. Isaiah Likely was hitting that ball. Zay Flowers was celebrating with them. We saw a bunch of swings, Tyler Linderbaum, Nick Moore. So the Ravens got some team bonding yesterday, which was really fun to see, of course, through the rigors of OTAs. This is week 2 for them. But the Ravens, team bonding is important, but we know on the field they have to produce as well. The camaraderie is strong already, but you can always add some team bonding to the mix. Now, with their on-the-field production, I wanted to kind of dive into some X factors today. It is early. We're still at the end of May, but just talk about some early X factors that really have to step up for the Ravens, or that the Ravens have to figure out how to use them. And to me, I think my number one guy, and I've been preaching this for a while, the Ravens have to give Isaiah Likely a huge role this season. He, to me, is Baltimore's biggest X factor on the year. 2 years, Mark Andrews has gone down with some sort of injury. 2 years, Isaiah Likely has stepped up. And really, the production has not dropped off. He's been a threat in the pass game, been a 3-level receiver for Lamar Jackson, and obviously his blocking's improved as well. But to me, you cannot limit Isaiah Likely's role because Mark Andrews is back. I think you find a way to utilize those guys in tandem, whether it's lining them up outside in the slot, in line together, 2 tight end sets. I think that opens up your passing game, first of all, but your running game, and with that comes the play action, right?
All of what you said is factual and true, and I like the fact that he could be a potentially strong X factor. Yes, Isaiah Likely, his role could be, in fact, increased even more so. You referenced the fact that Mark Andrews has had his injury, and I know that I got a lot of trouble last year because everybody was like, oh, my God, Charlie Kohler. Well, it was because of the year before I saw enough of Isaiah Likely to make that statement. I just felt like Isaiah was kind of like a blend of a receiver that is physical enough to be a tight end, and Charlie Kohler could be that pure tight end and also kind of have that pancake pat role as far as being a inline blocker at the position of tight end. Didn't quite work out that way. Clearly, Mark Andrews reestablished his dominance. But then, of course, the injury did happen. You're absolutely right. It's frustrating to see. But, yeah, from an X factor standpoint, I can totally see why Isaiah Likely had a large role. Then his role even grew more as he, got more and more comfortable. And it can grow more and more with different skill sets of personnel packages for Todd Monken as well as Lamar Jackson.
And speaking of skill sets, the Ravens, in the draft, even throughout the offseason and free agency, they didn't bring in that necessarily big-bodied jump ball receiver. Now, undrafted YSQ, I think you might know a big-bodied receiver that is now on this squad. He might be a little familiar with him, might share the same last name as you, which coincidence, right? That's a coincidence. But again, Qadry is 6'6", so again, that could be the guy. But in the tight end room, you can still use Isaiah Likely out wide with his big frame. We've seen the Ravens do that, and with Mark Andrews as well. So I think Likely is such a big X factor for them because you don't want to keep his skill set on the bench. We get the Mark Andrews as the number one tight end, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you limit what Likely can do on the field.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, talent is talent, and you are a fool if you don't use your talent. You're going to be more likely having not a good season, and you're going to get fired as a coach because you're not using the said talent the right way. And so I think that's where the mismatches can be. I think there's a concentration level and a discipline of growth that for Isaiah Likely. It's one thing to, surprise everybody and make plays, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are now ready for what Isaiah Likely can do. The way in which Miami is going to be ready for what Isaiah Likely can do. The way in which the Steelers, the Bengals, the Browns, heck, you open up the season, you darn well better know, yeah, we know Mark Andrews, but we also know his Robin to his Batman in Isaiah Likely. So I think that, with that comes the added responsibility of just being that baller and being prepared for the heavier workload. Is the offseason enough for him to really lock in, dial in, and be that guy? I know that he is relishing it. So in just, a blanket statement, absolutely, I think he's ready to handle this next step progression for him as a third-year tight end.
And Likely talked about it too during his media availability on Tuesday, where he essentially was asked what he was working on and where he's trying to maximize his game. And he said just working with Mark Andrews and asking him questions of like, why did you break your route off here? I want to work to break my route off in another situation so that we can work together to help this offense, because we know this is a tight end centric offense when it comes to the passing game. I think that is going to evolve with Todd Monken, especially in his second season. But we know how valuable tight ends are, and they have two really good ones. And you know what? I'll throw Charlie Kohler. They have three good ones there in Andrews, Likely, and Charlie Kohler, who I got to give a shout out to because he's your guy. So can't just leave him out for you. But I think also on the offensive side of the ball, and I've preached this forever, it all starts up front for an offense. On that offensive line, being able to open up rushing lanes, protect your quarterback. The Ravens are dealing with three new starters on that line. We don't know who's going to win those positional battles right now. Obviously, as we get further into training camp and those battles happen, we'll have a better idea. But projected, it feels like Ben Cleveland is going to win one of those two guard spots. Now, maybe he won't, but let's just assume for a second he will. I feel like he's such a big X factor because there are probably two or three ways his season could go if he wins it. You could have the Ben Powers arc, right? Ben Powers was in his fourth season. Hadn't really started before, didn't have a ton of reps. He wins that left guard battle, and he ends up putting on a pretty good performance throughout the course of the year, gets a big contract from Denver, and he earned that contract from Denver. Now, I know he struggled last year, but still, he played really well in that contract year. Cleveland's in the same situation. Fourth year, contract year. Can he do that? Or will it be, is his athleticism not to where it needs to be? Is he not going to have the foot speed to keep up with some of these quick interior guys? To me, all the offensive line is an X factor, but when you're talking about some of the unproven guys, I think for Ben Cleveland, since he's been with the team and he has had some reps on the field, this is such a huge year for him. And if he can play well, it opens up a lot more in the Baltimore offense.
So the thing with Ben Cleveland, and I just think the offensive line in general, but I love the fact that you use him as an X factor. The offense, it doesn't matter what offense it is. If you don't protect your quarterback, you're just done. You're screwed. You're not able to, be efficient and do what needs to be done. We saw, just the rotation of what they did last year. I thought at the same time from that rotation, Ben Cleveland, he went in and did well. Like I thought, there were times where, he had some strong looks. Obviously, there's always the steady room for growth. But overall, like as you referenced with Powers, it's figuring out the game. It's the game slowing down for you. It's like, all right, cool. This is what I need to do. Let me go out there and do it. And I think that he put himself in position with the reps that he had last year, live reps that you don't get throughout training camp, not until you face another team or not until you literally play a preseason game. You're not going to get those live reps. Now you got a mental image picture of what it's like to play actual meaningful games. And he did that. I think that's an excellent X factor by you.
Yeah, appreciate that. I think that for Cleveland, he's a guy that I know there have been some questions about his work ethic. And again, those reports, are they, true or not? I don't know the answer to that. But if he has been hitting it hard all offseason, if he has been putting in the work, we know the potential is there. He's a mountain of a human. His strength is off the charts. I think he could be a big player for them. A couple other guys on the offensive side of the ball. I think Justice Hill is going to be big this season, especially before Keaton Mitchell comes back. Obviously, Keaton, when he comes back, is going to have that role cue, but we don't know when that's going to be. ACL injuries, although the science has improved and the recovery times have gotten quicker, John Harbaugh made it clear that this is not a he'll be back in training camp type deal, or he'll be back in week 1 type deal. So that's going to be interesting. And then I also think someone who we'll talk about in the final part of the show, Rashod Bateman, is an X factor, but I'll also raise Nelson Aguilar as another guy who, if it doesn't work out with Bateman, if there are injuries in the wide receiver room, Nelson Aguilar is your number 3 this year instead of your number 4. So he'll have to step up and play a really big role as well.
Yeah, I think from a Nelly aspect of things, I think part of his role is just veteran presence. The kind of, I know what's going to go on. I think it was interesting when you heard from, Zay Flowers, and he was saying the thing that Odell had last year was that he'd been there so many times that he already kind of knew what to expect and what was going to come next. That's invaluable. But for Nelly, he has to be in that role. I think he is that kind of a teammate and can relish that role. So, not necessarily injury-wise, but, just being that guy, being available. You'd be surprised from a veteran experience, a timely word or a thoughtful understanding of something can mean the hugest of differences. And we already saw what he did last year. I think he's in a position where he can continue to build upon that. I think the overall flow of the offense, it starts with that offensive line. It starts with, guys taking that next step when it comes to Isaiah Likely. I think all those things are really key and important. But you're right, Justice Hill, it's not going to be a bell cow system with Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry is going to be having that welcome reprieve that he doesn't have to at all. But later down the line, his legs are going to be fresher because you're going to have Justice Hill being in there and being able to spell the dynamic, powerful back of King Henry.
Yeah, they have a lot of depth all over the place, and I think it really helps that they can rest a lot of their stars in a lot of different circumstances, keep them fresh not only for games, but over the course of what's going to be a pretty grueling regular season and honestly, hopefully long playoff run. So you got to keep guys as fresh as possible. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, we'll flip over to the defensive side of the ball, talk about some more early X factors we're identifying for this team. Stay tuned. We got plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. Now, I'm super excited for the NBA Finals, and it'd be really cool to go to a game. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view some receipt, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Now, for the NBA Finals, we know the Celtics are in there. The Timberwolves stole a game off the Mavericks, so it's 3-1 Dallas right now. So it's probably going to be Dallas, but it might not be. Maybe the Timberwolves pull off the reverse sweep. But for me, if I want to pick a game to attend, I love to go to closeout games, but it's hard to predict that. So maybe the opening game, maybe game 1. But Gametime has you covered because there are plenty of features over on the Gametime app that make the experience really great, such as last-minute deals, which is my favorite. You can save about 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. But that is not the limit of the features that Gametime has. In the Gametime app, again, it's a really easy experience as well. It's really easy to navigate with flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guess we're going to buy NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime to the last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. We're back for our second segment. Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail. Really appreciate everybody being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Be sure to subscribe to us here, follow along in audio form and video form. And also, if you haven't already, check out Locked On Sports Today for the biggest stories across all of sports each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But Q, let's get into the defensive side of the ball. There are a couple of guys I want to identify, and I think a lot of people have looked at this one, and we had talked a bit before about, who are some guys we think could really be some X-factors, and Trenton Simpson was a guy that everybody is looking at right now, replacing Patrick Queen. They knew that this was going to be their guy. He's a player that we saw that glimpse in the Steelers Week 18 game last year of the speed, the sideline to sideline, the energy that he brings. The Ravens aren't married to keeping Trent Simpson on the field this year like they were with Patrick Queen. If something happens where it's just not working out, I think they have other options. But Simpson showed that if he can play the way that he did in that Week 18 game next to Roquan Smith, the defense might not miss a beat there.
Yeah, I think one thing with Trenton is the fact that when you have a high tide raising all ships, and Roquan is that high tide, there's a certain comfort level that you don't have to think. You could just react and play. Trenton is that react, play kind of an athlete. Real just like, I'm going to get after you and do what I need to do. I also like the fact that from a bigger picture aspect of things, Isaiah Likely was asked about him in his presser earlier in the OTA week, and he was like, yeah, y'all probably saw where he kind of got the better of me. But I think it's cool because that just shows he ain't ready to flinch whatsoever, and he is ready to take on the responsibilities, yes, of making plays, yes, of being that guy that Zach Orr can depend on in the fine points of his defense. This is going to be an interesting year because of the new defensive coordinator, but I don't think it's going to be a year where there's going to be a huge adjustment for the fact that you got Roquan Smith. But X-factor-wise, Trenton Simpson, absolutely.
And I think, too, it's a big fact here that, as we talked about a tad in the first segment, Q, Baltimore's relying on a bunch of young players this year to step up. Second-year guys, third-year guys, fourth-year guys. They've let a lot of veteran talent walk out the door. And part of that is because they feel confident in the succession plans that they have made. And I think there was not a more obvious succession plan than Patrick Queen to Trenton Simpson based off of how that all unfolded over the past year. But speaking of, yeah, literally. And I from the second he was drafted, even we kind of knew that the writing was on the wall. But yep. I think also Kyle Hamilton is somebody, and this is another guy you talked about. To me, he talked about his leadership in that part of his game increasing, but there is still so much that is untapped with him. He's already one of the best safeties in the league, already one of the best chess pieces in the league. But I think a lot of people forget that this is Kyle Hamilton's third NFL season. He has not been in the league for 5 years or 6 years or 7. This is still a young player. He is still learning the game. And the fact that he is already so good is scary, in my opinion, in a good way for the Ravens, in a bad way for everybody else.
Yeah, I think he went from being a rook to a knight to now it is about being the queen and being the master chess piece on the board and can just wreak havoc. I think that's something that Zach Orr is looking forward to utilizing him. And I think it's so critically important. I know Marcus Williams, had the pectoral injury and he's kind of had, some kind of, injury or something that kind of really is derailed him from being the fullness of what I guess he should have been, could have been, would have been from when he was in New Orleans. I just think that, Kyle is a guy where, his desire to be great will flow extremely well with Zach Orr. And I think, he can help young guys like Wiggins, for example, or Tampa to really just come up to speed. I think he can, give some calm, if you will, to Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey and Arthur Millette because of his presence on the football field. I think he's that much of a guy that's ready to be an X factor and be the queen of the chessboard and really establish himself when it comes to what it means to be that dominant Raven player, to put himself in that next category of defensive player of the year. That was one of the things that, Zach Orr was talking about, man. If that happens and they open up with Kansas City, clearly, from a Travis Kelce standpoint, that would kind of still be sticking in my craw. He was an amazing player, amazing play, outstanding pass by the GOAT in Mahomes. But part 2 is coming up. Let him establish himself against that force of talent and of nature and that offense. My God, sit back, hold on. We're about to see something special from Kyle Hamilton this year. X Factor.
100%. And I think there are different levels to X Factors. Obviously, star X Factors are one. Underrated X Factors are another. Breakout player X Factors also. And obviously Hamilton Q. We know he falls in that star X Factor category. We're not going to talk about Lamar, right? Lamar, we know, is the biggest X Factor on the team. But of course, if we just talked about that for the show, look, everybody knows that, right? It's not, we say Lamar Jackson, sure, everybody says Lamar Jackson. We're trying to give some other guys some light here. And for Kyle Hamilton, he's a player that, not just on the field, but off of it, I think he's ready to take massive leaps, including that leadership aspect, which is so huge. Now, let's talk all 3 levels of the defense. We talked about the inside linebacker, the second level, talked about the secondary with Kyle Hamilton, the third level. That first line of defense, that defensive line, the pass rusher group. To me, Q, I think Travis Jones, he's my pick for breakout player on this team this year. He has been he's been knocking at the door. He has been breaking through the surface, just cracking it a little. I think he's ready to fully break out of that. But also someone who was extremely underrated. I think Michael Pierce was the most underrated player on this defense last year. Someone who wreaked havoc in the middle. You could make that argument for a couple of other guys, but one more name that I'm looking at, Tavius Robinson has apparently been a standout through OTAs so far, had a big role last season. I expect his role to be even bigger. To me, Jones, Pierce, and Robinson, those are all X Factors for me.
So the reason why I think those are some brilliant moves by you, it's just simply because if you can, with their murderous row schedule, get after the quarterback, like Philadelphia is not going to do anything. Kansas City is not going to do anything. The teams in the AFC North and the teams in the NFC East, as far as just trying to play and show how good you are against the Ravens, if those names that you talked about just now, if they, because literally, those are some badass quarterbacks. I think there's something to be said about Russell Wilson. There's something to be said about Joe Burrow. Hey, Deshaun Watson, he's going to be back. Get pressure in their face and watch what'll happen. Be one-dimensional, Travis Jones. You notice how he was used on the outside, kind of like a Vince Wilfork, and he collapsed the pocket on Brock Purdy last year. My goodness, man, that was just tremendous. So yeah, as much as you love the offense, you love Lamar and all the things, that is an X factor that hits it out of the park.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Travis Jones because you already have Justin Madubuike, who had his big breakout last season. You also have guys like Brent Urban on this defense, who's a steady veteran, and obviously Broderick Washington, who hopefully has, more consistent year than last one. But I do think that Jones is a player who is dominant in the run game. He's dominant as a pass rusher. He is a two-way player on that defense. And that's why, for me, there are a bunch of players you can pick for breakout player of the year, but I'm sticking with Travis Jones as mine. But coming with the final part of the show, we'll talk about Rashod Bateman's role a little bit. We'll also talk about the NFL's potential offseason plan, a new one that could alter how the offseason is done altogether. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot to get to on this episode of Locked On Ravens. We are back rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker and Qadry Ismail still talking with you on this Thursday. Q, with the NFL, there are a bunch of players that, are in that make or break year category. I think for a lot of people, Rashod Bateman was in that category. I still think he is to an extent based off of, he's not going to be gone from the team next year unless they trade him or whatnot, because he signed the extension. He's now a member of the team long term unless they decide it's not, not working for him. But I think that if it doesn't work out this season, they'll probably bring somebody else in and essentially demote him. They're giving him all the tools to the castle here, all the keys to the castle in terms of not bringing in any competition for him at the number 2 spot and making sure that he has the full belief of everybody. And that's where it is. It's like every single player, every single coach that is talking about Bateman during this OTA stretch, it's been nothing but praise. We have to get him the ball more. He's going to break out, nothing but confidence. And of course, that's the stuff you say, right? You're not going to go up there and, trash the guy, which I don't think they believe any of that stuff anyway. They obviously believe he's going to break out this year. But how much does belief go for Rashod Bateman? How much does not bringing in somebody to challenge him? How much does that impact him? How much does his teammates stepping up there, his coaches stepping up there and making their belief in him public? Because they believe behind closed doors, obviously, but they go out there, they get on the record. I mean, that's a whole nother level of their confidence.
So when you get in the offseason, it's time for pay. Pay tells the player how much we appreciate you, because now we're investing more and more into you, and we feel that you can help our team in a variety of ways. Clearly, Lamar Jackson was a different player this offseason compared to where he was at last offseason. I think the biggest thing for Rashod Bateman is the fact that they said, hey, here's some money. We want you. It wasn't like, ooh, this is big boy money, but it was money enough to say, hey, we want you. Let's go. We feel you're a valuable member of this team. And him being the first, I think it was a first-time, first-round draft choice receiver, got a second contract.
Yep.
That's saying a lot. And I think he can, the maturity level, the way he's handling himself with the media, he could put himself in a really good position, I think, to just be a monstrous year. And people are like, well, there's too many mouths to feed. All I need is 2 balls in the first quarter, 2 balls in the second quarter, 2 balls in the third, and give me, depending upon the situation, 4 balls in the fourth. 2, 4, 6. My God, I get 10 catches. And the way I described it, it's doable. It's within the framework of the offense. It's not trying to overextend. And at the same time, I should say, let me say it this way, 10 targets.
Sure.
Targets. And then it's up to him to, obviously be on the same page. It's up to the line to protect Lamar. It's up to Lamar to get him the ball. So 10 targets, bro. And other guys can easily feast within their own desires and goals and want to as well. I am Team Rashod Bateman.
Yeah, and look, I'm still a Bateman believer as well. And I think if you want to get to those 10 targets, we have talked about this every single year since we've started doing this together. It feels like if your name is Marquise Brown, if your name is Mark Andrews, and if your name is Zay Flowers, there's a chance you're getting 10 targets. If your name is anybody else, usually that means you're not getting 10 targets. So a couple of things I think need to happen. One, I think the offense has to become more balanced in general, right? This team was number 1 in rush attempts last year, and that's their identity. Don't go away from the identity. We literally saw how that went in the AFC Championship game, but you don't have to go away from your identity. But they were 30th in the league in pass attempts last season, and that is a bit circumstantial because obviously Baltimore was blowing out teams last season, and when you're doing that in the fourth quarter, you're going to run the ball. to try to get out of the game as quickly as he can, run the clock, bleed the clock down. That is kind of the Ravens staple over the course of the Lamar Jackson era. Get up by 3 or 4 scores, then just bleed the clock down and run it out. But there has to be some level of spreading the ball out for Lamar. I think he has gotten better at that over the course of his career, especially when he doesn't have his top targets available. But that includes Bateman. That includes Isaiah Likely. It includes their other quote-unquote X-factors that, again, we've been fixated on 3 names for the majority of Lamar Jackson's career. But I think with this added year and the added layers of Monken's offense, hopefully more balance is on the way. Now, we talked about the inside linebacker position in the second segment, Q. Patrick Queen is back in the Ravens controversy news cycle here. He's been in that a couple times ever since signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first time being when he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to cause some controversy on its own. But he went on a local Pittsburgh podcast, and I want to get your opinion on this whole thing. Essentially said that he was deciding between whether he wanted to win now and get paid later, get paid now and win later, whatever combination you want to put winning and paying in, and decided that he wanted to win now. And the difference between him getting paid and winning, it was only about $4 or $5 million is what he said. Some teams were offering in that like $17 million range. And the whole controversy as well, if you wanted to win now, everybody's saying, well, why would you go to Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh is a consistent franchise, much like the Ravens are. If you talk about the AFC North, it is both Baltimore and Pittsburgh who get recognized as, those are consistent franchises, always hanging around, even when it might not be their year. Mike Tomlin has those guys ready to play. Seems like he will never have a losing season ever as a coach of that Pittsburgh Steelers team. But everyone's like, why would you leave Baltimore? You have a 2-time MVP in Lamar Jackson. Your defense was all time last year. Why would you leave Baltimore to go to a quarterback situation that's uncertain? And what I kind of speculated was I'm not sure the Ravens offered Patrick Queen a deal. And again, that's just me speculating. There's nothing concrete about that. But if I had to guess, if Baltimore didn't offer him a deal, I mean, you can't go back if you're not offered a deal. It felt like the Ravens chose between Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen last offseason. And I think they chose correctly, but it was never in their framework to pay 2 inside linebackers. And the reason for them not offering, I don't think it was because they didn't want him back, but it's because if you offer him a quote unquote disrespectful deal, 3 years, $15 million, 3 years, $20 million, that's essentially a slap in the face. And you'd rather have the exit be more so along the lines of, we love what you did here. We appreciate you, but obviously for you and for us, it's probably not going to work. So that's where my mindset is. But what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think it's been shown in Ravens history how, they like to accommodate guys, and they accommodate guys in different ways. Obviously, Hayden Hurst comes to mind. Hollywood Brown comes to mind. Being traded, and the general public didn't see it coming. But I think with Patrick Queen, it wasn't about, well, let's see what the market brings. Then we'll make a counter offer. I think it was just a situation where it's like, yeah, we appreciate your, amazing play. Why don't you go ahead and see what you can get out there? And I think at the same time, if he wasn't getting everything that he wanted to get, he might have then had to have come back with hat in hand wondering, hey, give me something. But Patrick was Patrick. He had a phenomenal year, well deserving of the money that Pittsburgh gave him. And then at the same time, let's see, if you want that third contract, you got to produce. That's just the bottom line, produce.
He is embracing that villain role in Pittsburgh for Baltimore fans. And I think, again, the most anticipated meeting is going to be Derrick Henry and Patrick Queen in the middle of that field in the hole. And we're going to see who wins that battle. But Q, the NFL also is potentially going to alter their offseason a little bit. This came out yesterday or 2 days ago, actually. Now at this point, Tom Pelissero reporting that there is maybe some framework that could alter the NFL offseason and when guys report to training camp, as well as just how the offseason looks altogether. So essentially what the NFL would, and this is actually funny enough proposed by the NFLPA. So the Players Association is the one who is actually proactive on this, is eliminating, OTAs and mini camp and that whole deal. And the NFLPA is working to finalize overhauling the offseason. And it's like starting training camp earlier. So you're essentially potentially starting training camp, mid-June, early July, potentially you're reporting to training camp instead. So that's not necessarily taking away everything, right? It's not less work per se, but it's just altering when the work is. So with you being a former player, are you in favor with, the viewpoint on this, which essentially to me kind of feels like the players want the longer time off in terms of consecutively getting that long break, no reporting, no week in, week out, week in, week out, but then reporting to training camp earlier and having that be a much longer process?
Woo, buddy. I mean, I've had not OTAs per se. I mean, there were teams that I was on that, had good workout bonus, and we, went in and did our thing, and it was amazing. It was like 11 weeks worth of it. But then training camp was a 4.5 week proposition. I've been to places where it was like a 6 week proposition, and my God, man, that training camp took forever. There is no way I think it would be cool to have some kind of 11-week training camp. Like, just crazy to think of. That would be insane, especially, if you're a young player, you want to get these OTAs. They're not heavy. They're not, they're intense, but they're still, you still kind of have like a lightheartedness. Now, once training camp comes, coaches ain't talking about we're going to give you the day off and go to Top Golf. Somebody's going to be like, yo, we need to learn this offense. We need to learn the nuance of this defense. Hey, let's go ahead and figure out this special teams play. Trust me. I appreciate what the sentiment is, but I mean, maybe there's something that I'm missing from a framework aspect of things. But yeah, that to me, that sounds counterproductive.
Yeah. The full details of the framework, I'm not sure have been officially released yet, just going off of what Tom Pelissero reported. But it is an interesting change if it does happen. Again, this is not finalized. They have to go back and revise the CBA if they were to make that deal, because you're working with the NFLPA and the NFL. So I don't know how that would work, but I don't know. I can understand why the players would want the longer break, but if we're talking about the intensity of training camp going on for, whatever that is, that's a long time. So going to be interesting to see if they actually go through with that proposal. But Q, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on again, talking football with me. We're getting closer. I know we're kind of slogging through the low period of the offseason, but you know what? Our conversations make it a lot easier. So appreciate you as always. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on here.
Yeah, I love the missiletraining.com. Missiletraining.com is where you can find me, dialogue, reach out. If you're interested in human movement training, if you're interested in sports performance training, I'm your guy. At the same time, you can also find me on WJZ, myself, Mark Viviano, Rick Ritter. We've done an amazing job of accumulating shows that really give you what your television desiring needs are all about, as far as Purple Pregame, Purple Passion, Purple Playbook. At the same time, Locked On Ravens, yes, we are always here to chop it up and talk shop. Me and my guy, Kevin Ostreicher, this is what we do. We love it. And yes, reach out.
Q comes on weekly here on Locked On Ravens. So if you enjoy our conversations, be sure to check us out. Q's been in a bunch of different spots with me over the course of our partnership together. So right now we're doing Thursdays, and it's been awesome to work and get to know you, Q. So thank you for always being able to come on here. And again, the links to Q's work all in the description down below. So if you want some help, some body performance stuff, Q is your guy. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow along here in video form and in audio form. Coming up tomorrow, of course, we'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens content. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.